Chris wiped the sweat from his brow as he flipped the sizzling burgers on the griddle, the aroma of frying meat mingling with the early morning air. His food truck was modest, dented from years of service, paint chipped and faded, but it was his pride, his lifeline, his small kingdom in a city that moved too fast for most people to notice. Every day he poured himself into it, rising before dawn, enduring the long hours, hoping that each plate he served would bring him a little closer to a life beyond struggle. He had always believed that hard work and kindness were enough. In a world that seemed harsh and indifferent, Chris's optimism was his armor. But life had a way of testing even the strongest hearts. It was during a busy lunch rush that he first saw her, Rose. She moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. She smiled at the people around her, paid for their orders when she could, whispered encouragements to street performers, and offered extra sandwiches to those who needed them most. There was an unmistakable light in her eyes, one that drew people in, making them feel seen, valued, understood. Chris noticed her immediately, of course, not because she was beautiful, though she was in the way that made the world stop for a moment, but because she radiated goodness, the kind of person rare enough to be considered a treasure in the city's chaos. He barely had a moment to watch, because at that very instant, the crowd parted, and a man followed her through the throng. Daniel, her husband, a man of wealth, power, and an arrogance so thick it seemed to press down on everyone nearby. His tailored suit screamed money. His eyes bore a cold calculation that made even Chris's chest tighten. Daniel looked at Chris as though he had just spotted a bug on the sidewalk. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the noise of the busy street. "This is not your place. You shouldn't even be here serving this." He gestured at the food truck with disdain, as though the very concept of someone earning a living through honest work was an affront to him. Chris felt his stomach twist, but he kept his hands steady on the spatula. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. People like my food, and I work hard for it." Daniel laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Work hard? You call this hard work? You're beneath her, and beneath me. Stay out of our way, or you'll regret it." Chris's heart raced, but he forced a smile, calm on the surface, though a fire was building inside. "I don't want trouble, sir. I just want to do what I love and feed people." Rose's eyes met his, and in that glance, Chris felt a spark of encouragement. She didn't speak, but the way she held herself, gently touching Daniel's arm as if to calm him, and then turning to Chris with a soft nod, told him that kindness could still exist in a world filled with cruelty. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Chris served his customers with meticulous care, his movements almost automatic, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Rose. There was something about her that made him want to be better, not just for himself, but for the world she deserved to see, one full of fairness and warmth. That evening, after the lunch rush had ended, Chris began closing up, his hands tired, his mind exhausted, when he saw her again. Rose approached, standing at the edge of the food truck with a small smile. "You handled yourself well today," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. Not many people would have stood up to him without fear. Chris shrugged, a nervous smile forming. "I guess I've had practice. Life doesn't give many breaks." Rose's eyes softened. Sometimes, the people who need a little hope most are the ones who carry it in their hearts, even when the world tries to snuff it out. Chris felt his chest tighten. He wanted to say something, to reach out, to express the gratitude and admiration that filled him, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spread through him. Their interaction was interrupted when Daniel returned, his face red with anger. "Rose, we're leaving," he barked. "I don't want to see this charade of yours, associating with this man." Rose stood her ground, her hand on his arm, her voice steady. "Daniel, I'm choosing to stay here for a moment. I want to see his work, his effort. There is dignity in what he does." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he finally nodded stiffly and left, his presence leaving a tension in the air, a reminder of the world Chris was up against. For Chris, The day ended not in defeat, but in hope. He had caught the attention of someone extraordinary, someone whose heart was uncorrupted by wealth or power, someone who could see the man behind the hands calloused from honest labor. Little did he know that this was only the beginning, that his courage, his integrity, and his unwavering kindness would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. Daniel would not let such defiance go unpunished, and Chris's world was about to collide with a storm of pride, cruelty, and power that could crush even the strongest spirit. But love, as Chris began to realize, often arrives in the unlikeliest forms, and sometimes it demands nothing more than courage and faith to embrace it. And in that moment, standing beneath the fading light of the city, Chris decided he would not let fear dictate his life. He would fight for his dream, for his dignity, and, without even knowing it, for Rose's trust and admiration as well. The night closed in, and the food truck sat quietly under the flickering streetlights, a humble beacon in a world that had forgotten how to value effort, heart, and humanity. Chris locked the doors, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I'll try again, and this time nothing will stop me." The next morning, Chris woke with the sound of city life pressing against the metal walls of his food truck. The streets were already alive with the chatter of early commuters, the rumble of buses, and the occasional honk of impatient drivers. He rubbed his eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded himself that no matter what happened yesterday, today was another chance to keep moving forward. As he opened the truck and began prepping the ingredients, his mind kept drifting back to Rose. Her presence lingered in his thoughts, her words echoing like a gentle melody against the chaos of the world around him. But before he could dwell too long on her, a sharp, familiar voice cut through the morning air. "You again," Daniel said, stepping from the shadows of the street corner, his expensive watch glinting in the sunlight. His tone was venomous, each word calculated to wound. "You have the audacity to be here again, serving your little meals?" Chris felt the tension coil in his chest, but he met Daniel's gaze without flinching. "I have a right to work, sir. People like my food, and I'm proud of what I do." Daniel laughed, a cruel sound that drew a few wary glances from nearby pedestrians. "Pride? In this?" He gestured at the truck as if it were a crime scene. "You think this makes you worthy of her attention? She's my wife, and she belongs in a world far above yours. You should leave before I make you regret ever standing here." Chris felt a fire ignite inside him. He had faced mockery before, but this arrogance, this sense of entitlement was different. It was an assault on his dignity, on everything he had worked for. And yet, despite the fear in his stomach, he held his ground. Just then, Rose appeared, walking calmly through the crowd as if she had anticipated the confrontation. Her eyes locked onto Chris's, and for a moment, the chaos around them seemed to fade. "Daniel," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Enough. This ends now." Daniel's face contorted in anger. "Rose, don't." "I am not moving," she interrupted. "Chris is doing honest work, and I respect that. You will not belittle him in front of others. Not today, not ever." Chris's heart raced. He had never seen someone stand up for him so boldly, and the weight of her words brought both relief and a strange, tender warmth. Daniel's eyes narrowed, and he took a step back, the veneer of control slipping. "This isn't over," he hissed, before finally storming away, leaving behind a swirl of dust and tension. Chris exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the counter. Rose smiled, that same gentle, radiant smile that had captivated him the day before. "You didn't have to stay," he said softly. "I wanted to," she replied. "Kindness deserves to be witnessed, Chris. Courage deserves acknowledgement." The morning passed in a blur of orders and laughter as customers continued to flock to the food truck. Chris moved with renewed energy, the fear that had plagued him moments ago replaced by a sense of purpose. Rose lingered nearby, speaking with regulars, offering assistance, but always returning her gaze to him when she could. By the afternoon, a small crowd had gathered, intrigued not only by the food but by the tension of yesterday and the drama of the morning. Chris worked silently, each flip of a burger, each portion packed, a statement of perseverance and pride. And every time he glanced at Rose, her approving smile fueled him further. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street, Chris began to clean the truck, exhausted but alive with the satisfaction of a day survived and a dignity maintained. "Can I walk with you for a moment?" Rose asked suddenly, her voice hesitant, almost shy. Chris blinked, surprised, but nodded. Of course. They stepped away from the food truck, the sounds of the city fading slightly as they walked side by side. "You're not like anyone I've met," Rose said quietly. "You face the world with a kind of bravery it's rare. People like your husband, they assume fear will silence you. But it doesn't, does it?" Chris shook his head. "No, I can't let fear control me. Not anymore. I've seen too much of what happens when people give up, when they let pride or arrogance dictate their lives." Rose's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the world felt lighter, brighter. "Chris, there's something about you, something honest, something pure. It's a magnetic. People are drawn to it even when they don't realize it." Chris felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wanted to speak, to tell her how he felt, but the words seemed inadequate, dwarfed by the reality of her presence. Instead, he simply nodded, grateful for her recognition and for her courage in standing against the injustice he faced. The day ended with a quiet promise, not spoken aloud, but understood in every glance, every smile, every shared moment of understanding. Chris knew that the battles were far from over. Daniel would return, and the world would continue to test him in ways he had never imagined. But now he had a reason to endure, a reason to persevere beyond the heat of the griddle, beyond the scorn of the entitled, beyond the doubts that had haunted him for so long. He had Rose, and somehow that was enough to keep moving forward. The morning after the confrontation, the streets seemed quieter, almost hesitant, as if the city itself held its breath in anticipation of what might unfold. Chris opened the food truck, the scent of fresh bread and sizzling meat filling the air, a familiar comfort amid the tension that lingered from yesterday. Yet even in the rhythm of his work, he couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's shadow loomed nearby, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Sure enough, Daniel appeared, not with the arrogance of yesterday but with a calculated smirk, as if he had plotted every possible way to humiliate Chris again. He leaned casually against the corner of the building, arms crossed, eyes scanning the small crowd that had begun to gather around the food truck. "Still here?" he asked, his tone falsely light, the menace barely disguised. "I'd think after yesterday, you'd know your place." Chris took a deep breath, steadying himself against the anger that surged within. "My place is where I work, where I provide for myself and for those who support me. That's all the place I need." Daniel's smirk faltered slightly, his confidence shaken by Chris's unyielding gaze. "You really think you can hold your ground? People like you, they break under pressure." Before Chris could respond, Rose stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Daniel, you need to leave. Now, you've embarrassed yourself enough." The words cut sharper than any blade. Daniel's face darkened with fury, but Rose's calm certainty left him with no ammunition to fire. He muttered under his breath and retreated, but not without throwing one final glare that promised the fight was far from over. Chris exhaled slowly, the adrenaline leaving his body in heavy waves. Rose moved closer, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, her touch gentle and grounding. "You handled that beautifully," she said softly. "I know it's not easy, facing someone like that day after day." Chris felt warmth spread through his chest, a mixture of pride and gratitude. I can't let him define who I am, Rose. I won't let anyone make me feel less than I am, and I won't let fear control my life." Her eyes softened, shimmering with admiration. "That's why I respect you. That's why people are drawn to you. You face life with honesty, with courage, and that's rare." As the morning unfolded, the crowd around the food truck began to grow, drawn by the scent of fresh food and the subtle tension between Chris and Daniel's previous threats. They came for the food but stayed for the spirit, for the unspoken story of resilience and courage that radiated from Chris. Every order he prepared, every smile he offered, became a testament to his determination and integrity. Rose stayed close, helping where she could, yet always keeping a watchful eye on Chris. It was clear to her that the young man wasn't just humble. He was extraordinary in a way that could not be measured by wealth or social status. And as she observed him, her admiration slowly began to deepen into something more profound, something she hadn't anticipated. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the streets in golden light, Chris finally had a moment to breathe. He looked around at the bustling crowd, at the smiling faces, and felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. "Chris," Rose said, drawing him from his thoughts, "there's something I need to tell you." He turned, meeting her gaze, heart pounding with anticipation. "What is it?" She smiled, the kind of smile that carried warmth and sincerity. "I believe in you, not just in your work but in who you are, and I want to be a part of this journey with you." Chris's breath caught. He had faced countless challenges, endured ridicule, and fought against adversity, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming feeling of validation, of acceptance, of connection he felt in that moment. "You really mean that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I do," she replied. "Every word." The promise hung in the air, unspoken but understood. It was a quiet acknowledgement that together, they could face anything, that their bond was not just about attraction but about shared values, respect, and courage. As the city streets began to empty and the evening settled in, Chris closed the food truck for the day, a sense of peace washing over him. He and Rose walked side by side, their conversation light, filled with laughter and the tentative warmth of two hearts discovering something extraordinary. Though challenges remained, especially with Daniel's shadow looming, Chris now felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Rose by his side, he knew he could face anything, because courage, kindness, and determination were stronger than fear, arrogance, and prejudice. And as the night enveloped the city, the food truck stood as a beacon of hope, resilience, and the quiet power of a man who refused to be humiliated, a woman who refused to stand by silently, and the bond that was slowly, inevitably, forming between them. The next morning, Chris awoke to the familiar sound of the city coming alive, but there was an unease lingering in the air, a sense that today would test him like never before. The food truck, once a sanctuary, felt suddenly vulnerable, exposed to the whims of those who sought to belittle him. He shook off the unease, rolling up his sleeves, determined to face whatever challenges awaited. As he opened the truck, a crowd had already gathered, not only regular customers but curious onlookers who had heard whispers about yesterday's confrontation. Among them, Daniel appeared again, more calculated this time, his smile thin and predatory. He had brought with him two large men, burly and imposing, their presence designed to intimidate Chris and unsettle the customers. "Morning, little man," Daniel said, his voice smooth but laced with threat. "I see you haven't learned your lesson yet. Let's make this day interesting, shall we?" Chris's chest tightened, but he refused to show fear. "I work hard, sir. That's all I do. I won't let you scare me or my customers." Daniel's men began moving closer, creating a palpable tension. Some of the onlookers murmured nervously, unsure how to react. But before the situation could escalate further, Rose stepped forward, her posture commanding and unwavering. "Stop," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "This isn't a place for threats or intimidation. Everyone deserves respect here. Chris is doing honest work, and you will not interfere." Daniel's face contorted in anger. "Rose, this is ridiculous. He's nothing. You're embarrassing yourself defending." "I am not embarrassed," Rose interrupted, her eyes locking with Daniel's. "I am proud to stand beside someone who refuses to be humiliated, someone who works with dignity despite the odds. Now leave or you will regret it." The tension was electric, and for the first time, Daniel hesitated. He glanced at his men, whose confidence wavered under Rose's unwavering gaze. Slowly, he stepped back, his jaw tight, before finally retreating with a glare that promised this confrontation was far from over. Chris exhaled, the adrenaline coursing through him, leaving a mix of relief and lingering tension. He looked at Rose, her presence steady and calming, and felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You don't need thanks," she replied. "You've already shown the courage I admire. I just want the world to see it too." The day continued with a mixture of orders, laughter, and small victories. Chris's skill and determination shone through, and the customers responded, drawn not only to the food but to the spirit behind it. Each interaction became a testament to his resilience, to his refusal to be defined by humiliation or fear. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Daniel's absence was noticeable but not permanent. Chris knew he would return, and the thought made his stomach tighten. Yet now he faced the challenge with renewed confidence. He had Rose's support, the respect of the customers, and the unwavering belief in his own worth. Later, as Chris closed the food truck for a brief break, Rose approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him, their fingers brushing slightly, and he felt a warmth that had little to do with the beverage. "You're stronger than you realize," she said softly. "People like Daniel think fear can control you, but they don't understand the strength it takes to keep moving forward, to keep working with dignity and pride." Chris nodded, a smile breaking across his face despite the lingering tension. "I couldn't do this without you, Rose. Your support, it means more than I can say." She smiled, a quiet, radiant expression that seemed to light the street around them. "And I couldn't stand by and watch someone like you be humiliated. You deserve better than that, Chris. We both do." As the day faded into evening, the food truck stood resilient, a symbol of perseverance and courage. Chris knew that more challenges lay ahead, that Daniel would not relent easily, but for the first time, he felt a sense of unshakable purpose. With Rose by his side, he realized that even in the face of arrogance and cruelty, honesty, courage, and kindness would always prevail. And in that realization, he found not just strength, but hope, and the quiet promise of something beautiful blossoming amidst the trials of life. The morning sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the streets, as if the city itself sensed that today would be a turning point. Chris arrived at the food truck earlier than usual, his hands steady but his mind alert. Daniel's absence had been short-lived. Whispers among the customers suggested he was planning something far more disruptive, a move meant not just to humiliate Chris but to dismantle everything he had built. As the first orders came in, Chris worked efficiently, serving food with a practiced smile. Yet his eyes scanned the streets, anticipating trouble, knowing that Daniel's presence could appear at any moment. Rose stood beside him, offering quiet support, organizing supplies, and occasionally slipping a reassuring glance his way. Their partnership was seamless, built on trust, mutual respect, and a bond that had grown stronger with each confrontation. It wasn't long before Daniel arrived, this time with a larger group of men and a plan that seemed designed to strike fear into everyone around. He walked through the crowd with calculated confidence, his eyes locked on Chris, who stood firm behind his counter. "You really think you can keep this going?" Daniel sneered, gesturing to the growing line of customers. "I could shut you down with a word." "All of this," he said, sweeping his hand over the bustling street and the food truck, "means nothing." Chris felt the familiar tension rise but refused to back down. "This is more than food," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "It's about respect, dignity, and hard work. No one can take that from me." Daniel's men began to move aggressively, attempting to intimidate the customers and create chaos. But Chris, anticipating the move, acted quickly. With a combination of calm authority and quick thinking, he managed to redirect the crowd, keep the lines organized, and maintain a sense of order. Rose assisted, her presence steadying both Chris and the customers, creating a protective barrier of confidence and courage. The confrontation reached its peak when Daniel tried to seize a tray of food, intending to humiliate Chris in front of everyone. Chris stepped forward, blocking the attempt, his stance unwavering. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "You will not take anything from me, and you will not threaten those who come here in good faith." Daniel's anger flared, but the crowd, now fully aware of the situation, began to voice their support for Chris. Their cheers and words of encouragement created a wall of solidarity, one that Daniel could not penetrate. Humiliated in front of the very people he had hoped to impress with his power, Daniel faltered. For the first time, he experienced what it felt like to be powerless against someone whose strength came not from wealth or intimidation, but from courage, integrity, and the support of a community. Seeing Daniel's defeat, Rose stepped forward and took Chris's hand. "You did it," she said softly, her eyes shining with pride. "You stood your ground, and you showed everyone what true strength looks like." Chris exhaled, the tension leaving his body in a long, satisfying release. "We did it," he corrected, glancing around at the supportive faces of the customers and the unwavering presence of Rose by his side. As the day went on, the atmosphere shifted from tension to celebration. The crowd remained, enjoying the food, sharing laughter, and witnessing the triumph of resilience over arrogance. Chris and Rose worked seamlessly together, their connection growing stronger with every shared task, every exchanged smile, and every word of encouragement. By the evening, Daniel had vanished, leaving behind only the lesson that true strength comes from character, not wealth or intimidation. Chris and Rose closed the food truck for the day, walking side by side down the quiet streets, the city bathed in the soft glow of twilight. "You know," Rose said, her hand brushing against his, "I've never met someone who faced so much adversity and came out stronger every single time." Chris smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond pride. "I couldn't have done it without you, Rose. You've been my anchor, my courage when I faltered. I don't think I realized just how much I needed someone like you." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as if acknowledging the bond that had formed through trials, courage, and shared triumphs. "Then let's keep moving forward," she said gently. Together, Chris nodded, the weight of past humiliations finally lifting. With Rose at his side, he felt unstoppable. Not because he had defeated Daniel alone, but because he had discovered the power of integrity, courage, and partnership. And as they walked into the night, hand in hand, the food truck stood as a symbol of resilience, hope, and the extraordinary possibilities that arise when humility meets determination and love finds its way into the hearts of the deserving. The morning sun rose gently over the streets, casting a golden light across the city as if signaling a new beginning. Chris arrived at the food truck, his steps lighter than ever before. The challenges of the past days, the humiliation, the threats, and Daniel's relentless attempts now felt like distant memories. He knew the fight had changed him, strengthened him, and revealed the depth of his resilience. Rose was already there, arranging supplies and greeting the early customers with her radiant smile. Seeing her brought a warmth to Chris's heart, a reminder of why he had persevered, why he had refused to bow to intimidation. Today was not about proving himself to anyone else. It was about embracing the life he had fought to protect and the woman who had become his anchor through it all. As the day progressed, the food truck thrived. People came not only for the delicious meals, but for the energy and spirit that Chris and Rose radiated. Word of their courage and integrity had spread, and the street buzzed with admiration. Customers brought friends, strangers offered support, and a sense of community enveloped the small truck, turning it into a beacon of hope and perseverance. In the midst of the busy afternoon, a familiar figure appeared. Daniel, looking smaller and defeated, lingered at the edge of the crowd. But this time, there was no fear, no trembling, no intimidation. Chris met his gaze and, with a calm confidence, said, "You've had your chance, but nothing here belongs to you. You can leave now." Daniel hesitated, then slowly turned away, leaving without a word, a final acknowledgement of defeat. Chris exhaled, a quiet victory settling over him, one that was deeper than any he had ever known. Rose approached, her eyes sparkling with pride and affection. "You did it, Chris. You stayed true to yourself, and the world has seen what kind of man you are." Chris smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude and emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when no one else did, and you stood by me when it mattered most." As the day faded into evening, the food truck closed, and the streets quieted. Chris and Rose walked together, their hands brushing, then intertwining. The city around them seemed to pause, honoring the bond that had been forged through adversity, courage, and shared triumph. "Do you ever wonder," Chris said softly, "what life would be like if none of this had happened?" Rose chuckled gently. "I don't need to wonder. Because of everything we've been through, we're here, stronger than ever. That's what matters." Chris looked at her, the weight of the past lifting, replaced by hope and the promise of a shared future. "Then let's keep building," he said. "Together. Not just the food truck, but everything we dream of." Rose nodded, her heart full, and together they began to envision a future filled with possibilities. Love, partnership, and the fulfillment of their dreams. The hardships they had endured had only made them stronger, their connection unbreakable, and their spirits indomitable. As night fell, the streetlights cast a gentle glow on the food truck, now a symbol of resilience, hope, and unwavering courage. Chris and Rose stood side by side, looking out over the city, feeling the extraordinary power of love, trust, and the rewards of staying true to oneself. No wealth or arrogance could shake the foundation they had built. What remained was pure, a love born from respect, shared struggle, and the understanding that life's greatest victories are earned through courage, compassion, and unwavering integrity. And in that quiet, luminous moment, Chris and Rose realized that together, they could face anything, because love, resilience, and belief in one another were stronger than any challenge, stronger than any humiliation, and more enduring than any obstacle life could ever place in their path. They walked home hand in hand, hearts light, spirits soaring, ready to embrace a future that was theirs alone. A future filled with hope, triumph, and a love that had been tested, proven, and emerged stronger than ever.